Welcome to Charley Reed Crime Stories with your host, Charley Reed. Tucson, Arizona, often called the Old Pueblo, was the home of Charles C. Morgan and his family in 1977. Charles was an escrow agent by profession, and in March of 1977, he disappeared and reappeared 3 days after going missing with a bizarre account of what happened to him. And mysteriously, about 2 months later, he was dead. And this is the story of Charles C. Morgan. Morgan's wife had been dealing with the disappearance of her husband when 3 days after his disappearance, he showed up at home in the middle of the night, unable to speak, with a handcuff on his ankle, handcuffs on his hands, and one shoe was missing. He was able to write a note to his wife to give her an explanation regarding these strange circumstances, and what he wrote was stranger still. Charles wrote that he had been poisoned with a hallucinogenic drug that could kill him or seriously impair him, and he asked his wife not to contact the police or a doctor because that would put them in danger. Morgan's wife, Ruth, took over his care at home, and before his speech had fully returned, he told her that he worked for the government and that he was a secret agent. He claimed he worked undercover for the U.S. Treasury Department for the past 2 to 3 years, and his abductors had taken away his Treasury identification. I can only imagine what his wife thought about what her husband revealed to her, but I would say that what he said may have caused anxiety, fear, and intrigue, but also I can imagine that she may have had some doubts as well. I've seen documentaries and movies about people who were delusional about being secret government agents. However, Ruth's husband's current state and what is to come makes his declaration more plausible and much more mysterious. 2 months after Charles Morgan's first disappearance, he disappeared again. After about 9 days, Ruth received a strange phone call from an unidentified woman who said, quote, "Chuck is all right, Ecclesiastes 12, 1-8, end quote, and then hung up the phone. Unfortunately, 2 days after that strange call, Charles Morgan was found dead about 40 miles outside of Tucson with a gunshot wound to the back of his head, which later was found out to be from his own .357 Magnum found on the scene. He was wearing a bulletproof vest, a belt buckle with a knife hidden in it, a holster, some sunglasses that were found not to belong to him. He had weapons in his car, ammunition, and on the seat in the rear of the car, Mr. Morgan's tooth was found wrapped up in a white handkerchief. Now, if this isn't bizarre enough, it gets worse. Investigators found that his car had been altered so that it could be unlocked from the fender. And according to an article written on Parade.com, quote, bizarrely, there was also a $2 bill with several Spanish surnames and a map of the border area pinned to Morgan's underwear. The map led to Robles Junction and Felicity, the area between Tucson and Mexico. These towns had a reputation for smuggling at the time. Above the surnames, Ecclesiastes 12 was written, and an arrow was drawn to the bill's serial number pointing to the numbers 1 and 8. Some of the other writings on the bill had alleged Masonic references, and Charles also had a piece of paper with directions in his writing that led to the site where he was found, end quote. When Charles disappeared the first time, it was reported that he had testified in court regarding some criminal activity along the border of Arizona and Mexico. And when Charles disappeared the second time, the police reported that he was hiding out in a motel for about a week, and an acquaintance of his said he was trying to buy back a contract on his life. Once the investigation was complete, the sheriff's department regarded the death of Charles Morgan as a suicide. Even though he was shot in the back of the head, there were no fingerprints at the scene, not even on the gun, but there was gunpowder and residue found on his hands. But I will say, how could he shoot himself in the back of the head, number one, and how could his fingerprints not be on the gun if he shot himself? Well, the medical examiner's office did not agree with the sheriff's department's findings and ruled his death as an unsolved shooting. A few days after Charles Morgan's death, a woman called the sheriff's department in Pima County and identified herself as the same woman who had called Charles's wife Ruth with that mysterious message. The sheriff's department refers to this woman as Green Eyes, which is the name she called herself, and she told them that she met with Charles at a hotel during the second time he disappeared, and he showed her a suitcase full of cash that was intended to buy out the hitman who he believed was contracted by the mob. So Charles was still alive at the time that Green Eyes made that phone call. And in the 1970s, Arizona was reportedly used by the mob as a pipeline for narcotics, money laundering, and racketeering. And it is believed Charles had done some real estate escrow work for at least one mafia family. It is also believed that Charles may have had a deal with the hitman to pay him off so he would not kill him. But the hitman met him in the desert on that fateful day, killed Charles Morgan, and took his money. It was also reported that after the death of her husband, Ruth Morgan was visited at her home by two men who identified themselves as FBI agents, who flashed their badges quickly and asked to look through her home. Well, they ransacked her home and didn't seem to find what they were looking for. It was reported that a check was made to the FBI about the visit to Ruth Morgan's home, and there was no evidence to confirm that FBI agents were in fact dispatched to her home, and unfortunately Ruth was so frazzled during their visit she did not take down their names. Ruth Morgan also did not agree with the sheriff department's ruling and stated publicly that she did not believe her husband killed himself because it's something she knew he would not do. And she was devastated by the fact that she didn't feel that her husband's death would ever be solved. Unfortunately, at this point in time, Ruth was right. Charles Morgan's case is now an unsolved cold case. There were reports from a variety of people that Charles confessed that he was an undercover agent, and there were other theories about him being tied to the mob as well. And this theory is not too far-fetched because there were organized crime groups in Arizona at that time. I don't know what happened to Charles Morgan, and neither do the police, but I do know that the bizarre and mysterious happenings, I'm sure, have made it harder to deal with his death for his family and friends. When you know why a loved one died, you grieve the loss, and eventually it gets a little better every day. But when you don't know what happened to a loved one, it's harder to concentrate on grieving because there are so many unanswered questions. Ruth Morgan also did not agree with the sheriff department's ruling and stated publicly Ruth Morgan also did not agree with the sheriff's department's ruling and stated publicly that Ruth Morgan also did not agree with the sheriff department's ruling and stated publicly that she did not. Oh gosh.